Hello, good morning. Welcome back to Learn with Lorna. This is episode number 227, the first one back of this session. My name, if you're new to Learn with Lorna, my name is Lorna Steele-McGinn. I'm the Community Engagement Officer with the Highland Archive Service. We have 4 archive centres in the Highlands of Scotland, in Inverness, in Port William, in Portree and in Wick, where we look after historic documents relating to the Highlands of Scotland and give access to them through our search rooms, through events, activities and talks like these. This series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series of talks. But if you're able to donate towards our work, we really very much appreciate that. So welcome back if you're rejoining me. This series started in, 2021? And has been running ever since, telling stories from our collections. So it's been a good summer break in a way, doing all sorts of other things, doing activities for young people in the school holidays, giving talks, all sorts of other things, just a break from Learn with Lorna. But I hope you have all had a good summer, or those of you in Australia and elsewhere, I hope you've had a good winter. And thank you so much for coming back. So for the first episode back, we are starting with something both easy for me to research and something that I found great fun, and I hope you will as well: school magazines. And this is an idea that came to me in the middle of an episode earlier in the year when I started to give examples from school magazines and then thought this would make a great fun episode. School magazines are something immediately familiar to us. Many people will have contributed to them. If you have, definitely share that in the chat. But school magazines and publications have been around since about the mid-1800s, and they've served multiple purposes over that time. They have of course really radically changed in tone over the decades, and why they exist and what they include and who they're directing their writings to has all changed as well. Not every school produces or produced school magazines. Not every school has preserved them, either in the school or in an archive, and many schools used to produce them but don't anymore. So some of the magazines come to us through the Highland Council. So for instance, I'll talk as I go through about examples that have come in with the school records, but others come to us through privately deposited collections because people will have 1 or 2 of their own old school magazines within their papers at home, and so they've given them into an archive. Really depends who's kept them and why and where, I guess. So I want to share some examples from our collections which illustrate this breadth and diversity. And of course I'm definitely going to share some examples that made me laugh. So let's start with CI/5/25/6, the 1892 magazine for Reigning School in Inverness. Now the reason I've given you that, that reference number is to illustrate where it sits. So it's a CI reference number, so it's part of our County of Inverness records. CI/5 means it's in the education section, and CI/5/25 is the number for Reigning School. And this is a pink covered magazine. Says on the front, Reigning School magazine, published monthly, number 7, volume 3, Inverness, June 1892, price 1p. And this title is followed by an advert for Cornet Stationers, 55 Church Street, Inverness, advertising their cheap foreign stamps, notepaper, envelopes and visiting cards. And that theme of adverts being in school magazines, presumably because those businesses are funding or supporting the publications, that continues almost continuously throughout the years. So they're also a really useful resource for social history, for tracking local businesses and so on as well. So what's inside this 1892 Reigning School magazine? Well, it's 12 pages and it's a mixture of school news, announcements to readers and pieces of writing by pupils, ranging from the very short and pithy to the very verbose. So the long ones are far too long for me to share here, but I'll share some of the short ones in a moment. Titles of the pupils' work include things like Dick Oliver's Love, Are There Ghosts?, Reflections, A Bold Illustration, and various others. And incidentally, when I was reading one of the longer pieces entitled A Ramble in the Woods, the tone of it and the way that it was worded, and the humour in it was so reminiscent of Jerome K. Jerome's Three Men in a Boat, which is a favourite book of mine, that I looked to see when it was published. Three Men in a Boat was published in 1889, and I am absolutely sure that its influence is visible in this piece of writing in this school magazine, about 3 years later, written about 4 young men going on a trip together and going on an adventure. But let's have a look at the section entitled Notes and News, which contains a very useful article about the magazine's history. And it says, the reigning school magazine has lost an able supporter through the resignation of its highly esteemed editor, Mr. George A. Wilson. All of our readers, we are sure, will agree with us in saying that an abler and more pushing editor it could not have. Mr. Wilson's connection with the RSM has been a long and prosperous one, and all Reigningites, present and past, may be said to be under an obligation to him which will be difficult to repay. We believe that the first number of the RSM, the reigning school magazine, was under the editorship of Mr. Dougal McKechan. At that time, the magazine was written with pen and ink and not printed, and was hung up on a nail in the senior classroom. One curious thing in connection with this first attempt at a magazine was that it had a new editor every month. This system did not continue very long, and then Mr. Wilson took it upon himself the responsibility of issuing a monthly magazine, stylographed. This system did not continue long either. Mr. Wilson contemplated the idea of printing it, and succeeded in carrying out his resolution. The magazine was at that time extended to 4 pages, and was issued monthly as it is at present. Under the editorship of Mr. Wilson, the magazine gradually was enlarged until it now contains 12 pages and a cover into the bargain. Some may think it's easy to keep a magazine going, but if the printer's boy called at their doors 4 or 3 times for copy, perhaps they would change their opinion. No doubt Mr. Wilson had his cares and trials, together with want of copy sometimes, like all other editors. But he boldly kept going to keep doing his best until now, through him, the magazine has attained its present position. While attending reigning school, Mr. Wilson edited the magazine for 2 years, but when he left for Edinburgh University, the magazine ceased to be published. In November last, Mr. Wilson got the magazine started again, and kept it going until now. He has resigned, much to the regret of all of those who are interested in the RSM. Scarcely a number of the RSM was ever issued without some interesting article from the pen of Mr. Wilson himself. He could not only write prose, but some good pieces of poetry. We hope that although he has resigned the editorship, he will not cease to write for the RSM. Mr. Wilson all along spared neither time nor energy in making the magazine interesting and in widening its circulation. He has now left it on a firm footing, and it is reward enough for him for his services, the consciousness of his own untiring labours to further its interests, and the well-merited success that has attended him in doing so. So there you go, that's what you want in an editor, isn't it? That's some praise. Mr. Lamont was appointed editor in Mr. Wilson's place, with Mr. Critchley as the sub-editor. And that column continues with a notice about upcoming school holidays, a request for content, noting to the pupils it may be their first opportunity and might be their only opportunity ever to appear in print, saying that ghost stories, Highland tales, poetry and all kinds of literature will be received. Literature such as this short tale by one pupil. The advantages of telling the truth. The following is a story told of a Highlander who took part in smuggling. One Sunday he heard the minister telling the advantages of speaking the truth at all times. The next day Donald was working in his garden, and at the same time was pondering over the previous day's sermon. Well, he says to himself, if the gaugers were to come just now and ask me where I keep my whisky, would it be an advantage to me to tell the truth? Just as he was thinking, who should come to him but the excise man, who said, Donald, where do you keep your whisky? And Donald said, in a hole below my bed. If it was there you wouldn't tell us, they said, and they went away. I see, said Donald, telling the truth is an advantage sometimes. These pieces are followed by sports news, a long article about football, and then some humorous sayings. I think definitely humorous sayings are very much of their time as they continue to be. Another example of an early school magazine that we hold is the magazine of Inverness Royal Academy, the Academical Illustrated, a monthly magazine, which in 1892 retailed at 2p, so we're going up in price. This contains a very useful opening article about the centenary of Inverness Royal Academy, which starts What a sleepy old town Inverness must have been 100 years ago. There were no railways then, no telegraph, no good coaches. News took a long time to travel, and people didn't know then, as we do now, what their fellow beings in other places were doing. Accordingly, when any great event occurred in their midst, you may imagine what excitement there would be amongst the good folk of the borough for that precious something to talk about. So the 16th of July 1792 was a day that was awaited by the townspeople of Inverness with greatest impatience. That day was to see the opening of the institution in which we are most interested. The long-looked-for day arrived at last, and the academy was formally opened. Mr. Weir was the first rector, and there were about 200 pupils, or students as they were called, on the roll during the first session. Some of the duties of the teachers were rather remarkable. For instance, it was the business of the Latin master to attend to the coals. The school did not at first appear to be particularly fortunate in regard its choice of teachers, for there were continual squabbles amongst the masters and between them and the directors, and frequent changes were made in the teaching staff during the first few months. The students were also inclined to be unruly, and the directors more than once ordered the headmaster to mete out severe corporal punishment to those guilty of disturbing the academic calm. We further learn that the students did not pay their fees as well as they ought to. Besides their class fees, every student was required to pay 1 6 per session for coal and candles. He goes on to say, it's not my intention to go further into the subject, into the history, as a historical sketch of the school will be given in a future number. But I would rather here remind the reader that the centenary, the 100th anniversary of the opening of the school, is close upon us, and the question is, in what way can we best celebrate it? When men go to distant parts of the world, there are two pictures which they are always endeavouring to recall. One is that of their old home, and the other is that of their old school. And if they were to return to that native country, there are two places which they would be first to visit. The smallest thing connected with either interests them. Only the other day I received a letter from an old academical in Australia, in which he asked me if the blackboard that used to be in the Academy Hall was still there. If such small matters of these are of such great interest to old pupils, would they not be grieved to learn that something such as the centenary of the Academy had come and gone unnoticed? The editor invites suggestions as to how this marking may best be done in Inverness, the town with whose history for the past 100 years the Academy is so inseparably linked, and where of all places most old pupils will be found. And that reference to people generally retaining an interest in their old school is absolutely still true today, 133 years later. We frequently see, anytime we post anything about a school across the Highlands, that reminiscence chats start up on that. As soon as we put it on social media, conversations form around where people went to school. And they made very good use of this in the Academical. The magazine continues with a voice from Glasgow, written by an ex-pupil, news from Edinburgh and Aberdeen universities. The Aberdeen one starts, the appearance of the Academical has filled the hearts of the old Academy boys with pleasure and pardonable pride, and our memories have pleasantly reverted to the good old days. But it's not just the old boys who are represented within these magazines. Quite interestingly, the Academical has a section entitled About Our Girls, and it starts like this. "'Tis strange, but all the same a solemn fact, that the public generally give their attention to our boys or to some of our fellows. Why should people treat us girls with such indifference? Are we not as capable and as worthy to be written about as boys are, and as capable of doing great things as they are? This paper, however, is to be wholly restricted to our girls, and not to any others of the feminine persuasion outside these bounds." So it will be about A, about girls, and B, about our girls. And that pattern of news and reminiscence and information and creativity and pride, that runs right through the years. Yeah, I see your comment there, Jen. Still have your school magazines and love looking through them. I think that's true of a lot of people. If we turn to the Heatherley School magazine, Heatherley School was a private girls' school in Inverness, and turn to their magazine of 1928, we can read one of the pupils' articles about a camp held near Rosemarkie. This year, there was a combined camp at Lorna, present school and seniors camping together. The scheme was a great success as the seniors were able to meet the present generation and feel that they are very adequate representatives of Heatherley, while the present school were able to see that the seniors still take a tremendous interest in everything connected with the school. Miss Beadle and Miss Clark were there as usual to our great satisfaction, and Miss Hickey, Cookie, once more delighted our hearts with her wit and our innards with her victuals. There were 8 seniors, including Miss Hickey, and we were divided into 2 tents, the Albatross tent, A standing for ancient, and the Puffins, P standing for proud, powerful, and pertinacious. The present school were divided into Guillemots and Seamews. We were delighted to find everything unspoiled and, if possible, more beautiful than before. It was such a late summer that the wild roses had lingered to welcome us, and the cave had tall nettles guarding the entrance against the flood of yellow rock roses and purple cranesbill, which was lapping around the mouth and splashing up the sides. The rocks seemed a warmer red than when we saw them last, and the changing lights on the firth more subtle and exquisite. How we walked and talked along the windy shore. The wood patrols sought firewood, while the scientific in our midst collected bones and some other slightly noisome treasures. On another memorable day, we hiked along the shore and cooked dampers, potatoes and eggs, the latter being fried on hot stones. There was an evening on the moors playing a stalking game among the heather, the bell heather in full bloom, and sing-songs around the fire in the cave. One night we had very amusing charades. On fine evenings we danced outside, and then there was always cricket and bathing in the day for those who felt inclined. Rain and midges were our only enemies, but it kept fine until the end of our 10 days, and Scotland would be unrecognisable without the midge. If we turn to Portree School magazine, secondary school, of 1936, which is held, of course, in our Skye and Lochailsh archives, it's very clear that the audience for this school magazine is ex-pupils. They are spoken to directly. The magazine opens with the announcement of a change of headmaster. It says that Mr. Alexander Tate is leaving after 11 years dedicated service and is being replaced by a Mr. Ian M. Murray. Both of them feature in the Great Book of Skye, and both left a very positive mark on the school. The magazine has an appreciation of Mr. Tate, which is basically a glowing summary of his contribution to the school, his understanding and knowledge of the pupils, his teaching ability, and the development and reputation of the school under his leadership. And then it's followed by an introduction to the new headmaster, Mr. Ian Murray, in which he speaks really passionately about his deep family connections to Skye, his views on the historic contribution of Skianachs to church, to education, and his hopes for the continued progression of the school. It's interesting, he writes that his hope for the pupils is that they will learn both the importance of education, but also the contentment of truth, understanding and quietness. It's a really beautifully written article, and he would go on to remain at the school until his death in 1961, and it was under his leadership that it was Portree was turned into high school status. So you can get this kind of biographical information about teachers. And the rest of the Portree secondary school magazine includes pieces of writing by pupils. So poetry in English and Gaelic, Aunt Kate's Wisdom column. Here are some examples from Aunt Kate's Wisdom's column. K.R. writes in, I am 17, about to leave school, brainy, pretty and attractive. What should I be? And Aunt Kate's reply is, how about modest? Another one, S.T. writes, I am married to a man who is a very dull person. What can I do to brighten him up? And the reply, polish him off. There are also 3 examples from this magazine entitled In the Colonies. 3 impressions from people overseas, one from Canada, one from the Solomon Islands and one from Kenya. They're interesting articles, and as you would expect, they are absolutely full of colonial sentiment, which makes them quite uncomfortable reading for us. The Merchant School magazine of 1947 starts with an editorial, but this time the editorial is by pupils, and it's then full of stories and poems and news. There is no discernible adult voice in this magazine, 1947, and that's the first example of this I've mentioned today, where although of course teachers and adults will be present and will be kind of curating that, they're not discernible in the way that they have been up until now. Even the very youngest of the Merkinch pupils have a space in Infant's Corner in the magazine. So, for instance, My Story by Donald Grant. And the story is, my dog is called Monty and he is a very bad dog. So that's the extent of that story. I particularly enjoyed the modern ABC in the Merkinch magazine. It has an A to Z and it goes through describing different pupils, different parts of the school. They've obviously put a lot of thought into that. And it also contains a crossword, which is a new feature which we'll see going forward, but I haven't seen up until this one. If we come into the 1960s, 70s, 80s, many of the magazines become bigger and thicker. They've got extensive school news. So, for instance, the Milburn Academy magazine of 1964 includes articles on school trips, including to Pitlochry Festival Theatre to see Twelfth Night, or trips to Belgium. Pupils' participation in Drama Club, in the Inverness County Music Festival, the Social Service Club, the Horticultural and Tomato Growers Society, all of those are detailed alongside school notes. So you can get a huge amount of information about school life during that year. Here are a couple of extracts. So much has been happening in school, both in lessons and in other fields since the last magazine was published, that we have attempted in the following notes to spotlight only a few of the more outstanding events in our school calendar. As usual, visitors have talked to us on a wide variety of interesting subjects. For instance, we enjoyed very much a talk on local and national government given by Councillor Pollitt, which we felt made it more clear to us just how our country is governed. Mr. Gare from Easter Moniac Farm told us about how he grows the Golden Wonder potatoes, which make him famous, and also about the crop rotation and other farming methods he employs. Miss Boyko, the Ontario Dairy Queen, was another welcome visitor to Milburn and made a great hit, especially with the boys. We had our usual informative visit from Miss Annabel Duncan during the session. Visits from former pupils, although much more informal, are also greatly appreciated. It's nice to know that they haven't forgotten Milburn. The various school dances and parties throughout the year were all most enjoyable, but the Christmas festivities were an outstanding success. The gymnasium was decorated by the art department to represent the 12 days of Christmas, and it was with great reluctance that we removed these magnificent decorations on the last day of term. But my favourite thing about these magazines from the 60s, 70s and 80s are the surveys, questionnaires and interviews with staff. I have a riot reading them. I'd imagine if you went to those schools and remember some of the people involved, it would be even more satisfying. The Inverness Royal Academy magazine of 1962 includes a survey organised by the magazine committee and completed by the 4th, 5th and 6th years, so the senior classes of the school. It includes questions about pocket money, girls received less than boys. It includes questions about work and hobbies and whether they had responsibilities at home. Here are some of the findings and the fantastic commentary that accompanies them. Name 3 of your favourite authors. A tremendous diversity of opinion here, with Agatha Christie a firm favourite among boys and girls, 29% and 43% respectively. Both enjoy Hammond Innes, D.H. Lawrence. We are sophisticated, aren't we? Alistair MacLean, Dennis Wheatley and Georges Simenon, the Maigret TV influence obviously. 12% of boys, mainly the 4th years, like Mickey Spillane. Neville Shute, 28%, is more popular with the girls, and 14% of the boys support Ian Fleming, Dickens, Orwell, Jane Austen. Dickens, Orwell, Jane Austen and Graham Greene all received significant support. 2 pupils confessed that they do not or cannot read books. Question 11 in the survey. Do you like classical music? Boys 34%, girls 57%. Popular music. Boys 82%, girls 93%. Traditional jazz, modern jazz and so on. And they've commented underneath, we feel that our do you like has either been fairly loosely interpreted or else we appear to be an exceptionally musical school. Question 15 of the survey. Do you smoke? If so, how many per week? We regret that we are unable to disclose to the public gaze such vital and dangerous information, but we feel that we must mention the 6th-year boy who smokes 1 cigarette a fortnight but is trying to cut down. Question 20. Do you read horoscopes in the press? 50% of boys do, 87% of girls do. Some of the boys protested just a little too volubly that they would certainly never consider reading a horoscope. But despite the anonymity of the survey, we have a sneaking suspicion that the survey for boys should be higher. I just love the some of the conversation that goes around that. In the magazine of the following year, so still in the 60s, we find this, which I think will bring back some memories for people. Entertainment. Favourite radio show. Girls, Saturday Club. Boys, Beyond Our Ken. Most hated radio show. Girls, The Dales. Boys, The Dales. Favourite TV show. That Was the Week That Was, for both boys and girls. Most hated TV show. For girls, This Is Your Life. For boys, Compact. Favourite recording artist, Cliff Richard across the board. Most hated recording artist for girls, Frankie Vaughan. For boys, Billy Fury. The top radio shows with the girls are record programmes, while the boys definitely prefer light comedy. Mrs. Dale, after 27 odd years of broadcasting, comes in for the majority of hates, with the Archers and Billy Cotton close behind. That Was the Week That Was is extremely popular with both sexes of the 5th and 6th. No, I'll start that again. That Was the Week That Was is extremely popular with both sexes of the 4th and the 6th, but has very little support from the 5th-year girls, 25% of whom voted for Dr. Kildare, preferring this romantic feature to the new trend towards satire. Thank Your Lucky Stars was the only programme that approached That Was the Week That Was as far as the boys were concerned, and Ben Casey has 2nd place with the girls. There was no outstandingly unpopular television show, and there were quite a few near the top. Gardening Club, Coronation Street and Pinocchio. One boy hates everything except That Was the Week That Was. Cliff Richard just won over Elvis Presley as favourite artist. Most of his votes were from the girls, the boys were a bit more divided. 6th-year boys' top artist was Millicent Martin. 5th year's was Elvis Presley. 4th year's was Frank Ifield. Mr. Doughty received votes, as did Mr. Kennedy, but Alistair McBain outvoted both. Frankie Vaughan was far and away the most unpopular artist with the girls, with Helen Shapiro coming in 2nd. The boys had an extremely varied selection, including Chadwick Scoop and his Downtown Hairy Heads. It's marvellous. I just really love reading through the surveys. An analysis in that magazine of the school clubs and societies goes on to note that the choir, the debating society and the musical society might attract more 4th-year boys if smoking was allowed. Another survey that I really enjoyed was from Uig School in Skye, which is now closed. In 1987, pupils were asked for their opinion about a potential Skye bridge, and here are some of their thoughts. Marion, 4, says, "It would spoil the look," I assume it's class 4 and not age 4, "It would spoil the look of the island. And say a man murdered a girl. He could get away if there was a bridge. Police can catch people when there's a ferry." If Skye decided to have a bridge, says Lorna, what would the poor Kylakan pensioners do? They'd have to walk a long way over the bridge to Kyle for their shopping. Robert says, "I think Skye should have a bridge because it would be faster for cars. A hole might come in the boat and I think a bridge would be safer." And Joan, "What's the use of Skye having a bridge? We have helicopters for emergencies and we have a boat. It would spoil Skye's landscape and drain the government's money away. We could use that money for something more important than a bridge. So my answer is no." And then Kathleen, "Should Skye have a bridge? The advantages are 1. It's quicker, 2. It's safer, and 3. It's cheaper to go across. If it wasn't on Skye, I would probably vote for it, but I want the good old-fashioned boat here." Really, really thought-provoking reactions there. And of course, school magazines are often come into their own for special occasions and particularly for school anniversaries. And we hold various magazines that have been created for school anniversaries. I really enjoyed looking through the Central School Centenary magazine, which has some extracts from the school logbook, interviews with ex-teachers and all sorts of other interesting things. But I want to finish by returning to the magazine produced by Dingwall Academy in 1989, when they were marking 50 years since their move from the old Academy building into a new building. I've previously shared some of the pupils' thoughts in previous episodes about what the future would look like. If you remember, they had visions of robot teachers and perhaps even a bike shed. But what else is in this magazine? I really enjoyed a feature entitled The Way They Were, which is photos of teachers as children with clues to help identify them, such as his career has mapped out, or never at a loss for words in any language. And I shared some of those, maybe you'll remember, on our Facebook page a wee while ago, and there were some memories coming up there of particular teachers. But it's not just the teacher's career progression that's being examined in this magazine. And I wanted to finish with a poem on a theme common across the decades and decades of school magazines. What do you want to be when you grow up? My ambitions. I'd love to drive a railway train, the fastest of the lot, to drive from here to John O'Groats aboard the Royal Scot. I'd love to drive with Eyston at Brooklands on the sand, or to fly with Limburg and cross undiscovered land. To pilot the Queen Mary across the wide, wide sea, and to have a race and win it against the Normandy. It's fun to think about them, the things I'd like to do, but I wish the time would hurry and come around. Well, don't you? That was written by Charles, and I wonder what he went on to do. I hope you have enjoyed this first episode back in this run of Learn with Lorna. Thank you so much for coming back. As you know, if you've been with me for the 5 years, I'm always worried nobody will bother coming back for the first one back in the autumn. So thank you for joining me again. I'm going to do another episode on school magazines because I found all sorts of other fun things. Next week, if you can join me next week, we will be looking at the subject of football memories, a big project undertaken by our Ambala service along with various football clubs in Inverness. So we're going to be looking at football memories next week. But thank you so much for joining me this evening. I hope I'll see you next week. If you're in and around the Highlands, we've got a big open day on Saturday at the Highland Archive Centre in Inverness. Please do come and join us. And we've got one coming up in Nucleus, the Caithness Archives as well. So check out both of those Facebook pages for more details. A reminder that this series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there is no subscription or purchases involved in this series. But if you're able to donate towards our work, then we really appreciate that. Thank you.